I'm getting ready to show you a movie that's going to run for an hour, okay? It's just random Jack Kruse-isms. I can tell you at 24 minutes, there's going to be one slide. Take a picture of that because it's Jack Kruse 101 in one slide. That's all you need to know. At the 1 hour mark, there's going to be a little story about goldfish. Make sure you read it, okay? There's going to be, in the beginning here, where we start, I'm going to tell you, I wasn't going to do this, but there's going to be two people who have a fatal genetic disease that you're going to see. You're going to see one other person who's got a disease you all know about called obesity that also got reversed. We'll talk about that. But then we're going to talk about a lady named Kate. And Kate, unfortunately, isn't in here because I didn't know I was going to meet Beth. And Beth basically got entangled with me and Ruben while we were sitting over there this morning. So, Ruben said if I press that button, it'll start. The key to everything that you've heard in your entire life is playing on the screen right now. That's sunlight hitting a tree, okay? That process is called photosynthesis. When I was in medical school, no one knew how photosynthesis worked. Then around 2007, 2008, we found out all 39 steps are quantized. What does that mean for those who don't understand quantized? Driven by light. What do you and every living thing on this planet have in common with a tree or a plant? You're both alive. What's the difference between you and a tree? Anyone, you can speak up. Correct. Trees don't have to eat. Why? Because they make their nutrients out of the thin air. Why do they do that, folks? Because they're 100% connected into the ground, to the magnetic flux, and their canopies 24/7 are to the sun. There's no need for food. Think about that. We're at a food event. We're talking Western A price, and Dr. Kruse just said, food ain't that important. Now, it has some importance, but yes, I came here to disturb you in a big way. And the reason I came here to disturb you has to do with these pictures you're going to see. Every food web on this planet basis is in photosynthesis. I want to say that again. That means if you don't know shit about photosynthesis, you don't know shit about food. And you need to understand that. Now, when the paleo guys, the low carb, high fat, the Western A Price Foundation talk about food, the dominant thing that you hear from them is proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. And I know we have some doctors in here. I challenge anybody by tonight to go find a biochemistry book and show me where the input on the inner mitochondrial membrane has proteins, lipids, or carbohydrate transporters. What is it called? Electron chain transport. So what does that mean? That means food is about electrons. In fact, every food we break down is about electrons, okay? 10 years ago, I didn't know that. So how did I change? You saw my picture earlier. I was in Birmingham, Alabama, I think it was 2005, 360 pounds, got up to give a talk on minimally invasive spine surgery to a bunch of neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons about things that I had designed and really cool stuff. And I stood up and I tore my knee meniscus. And I didn't know why. And I had to be helped to the podium to give the talk. I had to be helped back to my room. It was really bad. One of the orthopedic surgeon's wife happened to work for a biotechnology company that most of y'all have heard of. It's called Amgen. She said, Jack, she goes, I think I know why this happened to you. She goes, would you mind if I sent you some papers and a book? And I think you'll be able to figure this out. So she was really nice. I went home. I found out that I tore my medial meniscus. I had a bucket handle tear. And I was like, I can't believe this happened. I always thought you like had to go skiing or roll down a hill or do something to get a meniscus tear. So I get this package in FedEx, and the name of the book was Robin Sharma was the author. It was called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Then there was 6 papers. She gave me strict instructions. Read the book first, then read the papers in this specific order. So I'm going to tell you really quick about the book. The book was real interesting. It was about a Jewish guy named Julian Battle, who was the best attorney in New York City. He had a heart attack in the courtroom. When he had a heart attack, he basically quit being a lawyer, decided to move to the top of Himalaya mountains, and he came back 3 years later, tan, 100 pounds less. Everybody said he was a nice guy. He was no longer an asshole. So I read this book, then I followed her directions, started to read the papers. And the papers are about hormones, leptin, photoelectric effect, things like that. And I'm like, is she trying to tell me that this book that's a fable is true? Turns out that's not what she was trying to tell me. She was trying to tell me that the company that she works for was trying to screw everybody with the leptin trial. See, leptin is the master hormone in the body. It controls every other hormone in your body. But what most of you don't know is leptin is photoelectric, okay? What does that mean? You all know about this Einstein cat. In 1922, he won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect. What does that mean in English? Light only interacts with electrons. It cannot interact with protons or neutrons. That is how electrons are programmed. Now let's stop. Let's bring it back to the food people. All foods become electrons. Do you know that all electrons everywhere in the universe, including here, the paleo community, low carb, high fat, or Western A price, all electrons are identical? What makes them different? The light that fills those electrons. And guess what? Your mitochondria is designed to decipher that Rosetta Stone. So, guys like Jimmy Moore talk about all the time, carbohydrates are bad, everybody needs to be ketotic, and da-da-da-da-da. Horseshit. That's why they don't like me. The reason why? Carbohydrates only are fattening when you're missing UV light. Why? When do carbohydrates grow? When light cycles are longest. Why do carbohydrates fatten mammals? Because they're still available in the autumn when what happens? UV light goes away. See, UV light isn't present from the time the sun rises to the time the sun sets. So why would nature, Mother Nature, build in a system for mammals to fatten? Because you people in Vermont know it gets pretty freaking cold up here between November and February. Well, what do? What is fat fundamentally? Fat is a bunch of protons. See, I don't think about inflammation like any other doctor you're ever going to meet. So you have two issues. You can have too little electrons or too many protons. That's what makes you fat. So here I was, 360 pounds, and I said, I'm going to take my family on a trip. So we went to Europe. One of the things on my bucket list is to see Michelangelo's David. So I'm standing there, and if any of you have seen it, everybody always is in the front looking at David. I went behind and looked at his butt. So I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, this has always been on my list because it's perfection. And I said to myself, what's the difference between perfection and my fat ass? And then as I looked up, I got the answer. I looked up, and there was a little ledge, and there was a bird that was sitting up there. And the sun was coming through the window, and it dawned on me. I said, the environment that David was made in 500 years ago was radically different than the environment that I had. And just so you know, because you heard it ideally from Beth, I was taught as a medical doctor that the genome is the key. Genetic determinism is it. It was at this point behind Michelangelo's David that I began to realize that I had missed the biggest part of the human story. In fact, I will tell you the eukaryote story. And for those of you who don't know what a eukaryote is, there's three kingdoms of life: prokaryotes, archaea, and eukaryotes. We are the most complex eukaryote. Mitochondria comes from prokaryotes. It's a bacteria that we stole at endosymbiosis 600 million years ago. There was something else that happened 600 million years ago that you need to know about. Ruben's already clued you in. Everybody know about evolution here? Okay, you know that evolution is about constant change. What if I was to tell you, you need to listen, that in 600 million years of eukaryotic evolution, all the way from those little gerbils all the way up to us, that DHA hasn't been replaced one time in the mammalian kingdom. Do you know why? Because eukaryotes game complex. Everybody in the room knows that archaea and bacteria are basically single cell or small celled organisms. We are made of trillions of cells. Why did that happen? DHA fundamentally turns sunlight into a DC electric current. Now, You heard Ruben talk about the DC electric current. Let's fast forward back. There was a guy named Burr who's in Becker's book, first book to write down, Body Electric by Robert O. Becker. Read it. It's important. You're going to find out that every plant on the planet, every animal on the planet, in fact, anything alive, uses the DC electric current to regenerate, okay? That was the first key to me that I needed to look deeper. So I get on the plane back from Europe, and I start writing all these like ideas that I have down, you know, about what bolt of insight that I just had, that I need to stop looking in the genome, and I need to learn a little bit more about mitochondria. Because what is a mitochondria fundamentally? It's an environmental sensor inside your cytoplasm. For those of you who are not scientists, that means it's swimming in a sea inside of you of cell water. Everything that we know in a biochemistry book is only known when you subtract the water out and just look at the proteins. Here's a little clue for all of you. The proteins in the Krebs cycle do not work the same when they're unhydrated versus dehydrated. Most people don't know that. So that means most of what we believe about biochemistry is absolute horseshit. Now, when I said that 10 years ago, I was looked at crazy, I'm a heretic. Well, guess what? This cat comes by named Jim L. Khalili, another book coming, Life at the Edge. He's a quantum biologist from the University of Surrey. He goes and explains to people exactly how enzymes work in the body and how proteins work. You know what it turns out? That proteins are unhydrated don't work the way they do in life, okay? So I wrote all these ideas down, and I came up with a prescription called the leptin prescription. It's got 6 steps, and I also came up with something called cold thermogenesis protocol. You can find them on my blog. They're not important for right now, but there is one part that I do want to explain to you that is important. Leptin prescription is basically a moniker for circadian biology. It's all about light. You want to filter it all down to what it's about? It's about light. What is CT about? CT is very simple. It's about magnetism and increasing the magnetic effect in your mitochondria. So most of you are probably going, wait a minute. We have magnets in us? How come the refrigerator magnet doesn't stick on us when, you know, my kids put it on me? Well, it's a different kind of magnet. You have respiratory proteins in your mitochondria, okay? 1 through 5. They don't have fancy names, but the 5th one, I think everybody in the room knows. It's called the ATPase. That's where we make ATP, okay? It's got a nano rotor motor. It spins at ridiculous rates. If anybody Tesla fans, anything that spins, what does it do? It makes a current, and it also makes an associated magnetic field. So I know we have a cardiologist in the room. When I was in medical school, I didn't learn that we can measure the magnetic field from the human heart 22 feet out of the chest. But guess what? In 2007, we proved it at Harvard University by using a squid magnometer. We now know the same thing happens in the brain. Guess why that happens in humans? Where do we reserve most of our mitochondria? Here and here. See, we're special kind of eukaryotes. Not all animals keep them there. So after I came up with the leptin prescription, the cold thermogenesis protocol, I'm standing around with my family at a huge fest, kind of like you guys are getting ready to do later tonight. And I told my family at that day that I was going to be in a Speedo in a year if this stuff works. And everybody laughed, except one person, my wife. And the reason why is because when I came home from this trip, there was my man room that has all my wine collection. It's about as big as this room. It was stacked with papers this high. I spent almost $12,000 photocopying all the papers that I just told you to read about in some of these books that you're going to hear. You no longer have to do what Jack Kruse did 10 years ago. Now there's books that you can buy for literally $90 and $100, and you're going to go, how come I've never heard this before? Because it's different. And guess what? It goes to the crux of Beth's problem. We have 2 genomes in us. We have focused in on the wrong one, okay? The geometry of the respiratory proteins is the single most important thing inside a cell. And how we control them has to do with a lot of the science that Ruben danced around. He didn't want to give you the whole thing. He wanted me to bring it to you. So I used the leptin prescription and cold thermogenesis protocol to lose 77 pounds in 3 months, 133 pounds in 11 months. And guess what? I ate more, and I didn't exercise one bit. So guess what I proved to myself that day? It ain't about food, and it ain't about exercise. In fact, there's a famous paleo couple that wrote a book. It starts with food, and I have a pretty famous quote where it says, no, it starts with circadian biology. And see, here's the key. If you don't have the proper light signals, you don't tell the mitochondria how to deliver electrons through electron chain transport to oxygen. What's the fundamental reason that all of us have to breathe? Oxygen is the terminal electron acceptor. So depending on how much oxygen you have, that turns out how many free radicals you make at cytochrome 1. So guess what that means? If you're hypoxic, like you saw my buddy Jeremy on there, he has cystic fibrosis, by the way. Have you ever seen anybody with half a lung climb upside down on a rock like you saw him do? But guess what? He goes to Birmingham, UAB, every January, and they check him. He's been a friend of mine for 3 years. And he said one thing to me at a Starbucks when we first met. He said, Jack, I've told every doctor I ever met that I believe I have the ability to breathe through my skin. And he said every single doctor laughed at me and couldn't explain why he does what he does. Just so you guys know, he's a world-class rock climber, goes all over the world. He's a metal sculptor. He knows nothing about science. And I told him, I didn't know the answer, Jeremy. I said, but if you give me some time, I'm going to figure it out. So I wrote a blog post for Jeremy. It's called 1031. It's called Jeremy Spoke at Class Today. Jeremy taught me something. The major way I tell people to eat for the modern world is based on what Magda told most of you today. The more blue light, and I look, just so we're all clear, what she calls electric smog, blue light is at the top of the list. It's the #1 non-native EMF. And the reason for that is because in your eye, you have a clock. And that clock runs the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which controls every growth and metabolic program in your body. Notice that I didn't say, oh, but not this. Every single one. So guess what? If your clock doesn't tick right, in front of each human gene, there's now 25,000, there's been found to be a peripheral circadian clock that pays attention to which clock? This one, okay? This clock has to run faster than the clocks everywhere else. Whose law is that? It's Einstein's general relativity and special relativity mixed together. For those of you who are not physics fans, each one of you have a cell phone that has GPS on it. That's how GPS works. So if the clocks up above run slower, guess what? You're going to wind up in Cambodia. And guess what? That program is what controls how electrons from food are handled in you. So let me ask you a question. If the program that controls the electrons is off, do you think food really matters? I want you to think about Memphis, Tennessee, where FedEx is. You have arrivals and deliveries. Everything's running great, and then all of a sudden one day Ruben shows up and people are interested to talk to him. Then arrivals and deliveries come all at the same time. Is that order? No, that's chaos. What's the synonym in medicine for chaos? Inflammation. What does inflammation mean to Jack Kruse? Too many protons, not enough electrons. Ruben said something earlier and somebody blurted out the answer about pH. What is pH? pH is a proton gradient. Why is protons important? When you have too many protons in your body, water, third book, Gerald Pollack, okay, the fourth phase of water. You need to understand that proton gradient in your body diminishes your EZ. The EZ is called the exclusion zone. The exclusion zone is a battery that's made out of red light predominantly. But guess what? After it's made, what key thing does it do? It excludes things all the way down to the atomic size of a proton. So I heard 4 people today talk about toxins. Bullshit. Why? Because when your exclusion zone is built inside a cell membrane that's hydrophilic because it has what? DHA. Why do the paleos get certain things right? Because they like grass-fed meat. And guess what? Grass happens to have DHA in it, and you need a cow to eat it to turn it into the SN2 position. Why is the SN2 position big? Ruben didn't tell you this. That means it makes it paramagnetic. You know what paramagnetic means in physics? It's drawn to electromagnetic fields of a spinning ATPase in the 5th cytochrome. That is how it gets in your heart, and that's how it gets in your brain. So when your vegan friends tell you to go eat a pill that's DHA out of its cytosocial behavior as it is in your skin cells or anywhere else, it doesn't work. Why is DHA the fundamental key thing in biology? Because it has this pi electron cloud. There's a guy that Ruben showed you his paper. His name is Michael Crawford. He wrote a book on evolution in the brain. Everybody in the paleo community believes that you can go out in the savannah, eat animals, and get a human brain. Well, if that's true, then tell me why we don't have really smart lions. That's right. They're full of shit too. And I want to make sure that you get the message. We are the one eukaryote on this planet that has 3 pounds of it here, and it's all through our system. And when you live in a blue-lit microwave world, you need more of it. Do you know why? Blue light destroys DHA in cell membranes. What else does blue light do? Blue light raises blood glucose. What else does blue light do? Do you know that blue light causes insulin resistance? So let me ask you a question. Do you think guys like Jimmy Moore and the low-carb, high-fat guys are right that carbohydrates give you diabetes? No. See, the lack of UV and IR light does. What's also special about the ATPase in the mitochondria? That head rotates. Do you know that Ruben told you that red light penetrates all the way down into between 10 and 30 centimeters into your body? It's part of the reason why I'm wearing red today. For those of you who don't know, I always wear purple. But I had a funny feeling that red was going to be the topic today. We were going to talk about mitochondria. I don't know why, but I did it. It penetrates in, and it's been shown and published. I just put it on my Facebook page literally 2 weeks ago, that the ATPase is a quantum nano machine that runs off red light. So for all of you who don't understand what I just said, the faster you spin it, the more ATP you make, and the higher oxygen tension you need. That means that it fundamentally does the same thing as food. It increases electron chain transport. And for those of you who don't know anything about medicine, it's pretty simple. Life is how you move electrons from cytochrome 1 to oxygen. If you give someone a blocker, which you all know, it's called cyanide, it blocks cytochrome 4, you're dead like that. So death is the absence of flow of electrons. That means the 5th cytochrome can't spin. Everybody in medical school learns this key fact. ATP is the high energy phosphate bond that drives all the biochemistry. Well, I'm going to teach you about a guy named Gilbert Ling. In 1950, he was a brilliant guy. No one, if you think my book is bad, read his. He basically tried to describe quantum physics using words, but the guy is brilliant. Let me tell you the number one thing you need to learn from Ling, but you'll get the message as a 3rd grader would in Pollock's book. Ling did a study and showed that if ATP was the true battery power inside a cell or a mitochondria, that it would break the 2nd law of thermodynamics by 50-fold. Turns out that study's been redone in 2007. It's now 3,000-fold. So you know what physics says about things like this? If you can't explain the mathematics, then your theory is wrong. That was done by a guy named Feynman. So along comes Pollock and does the seminal research to show that water in you, I don't care how you structure it. I care that you structure your cells with DHA because electrons added to cell membranes in eukaryotes make them hydrophilic. And what does that mean? It means the EZ gets bigger. What does your mitochondria release? Infrared light. That means it's red. You're designed to be an ultimate fat burner. And how do you fat burn as a human? Key name. Everybody needs to write this down because this is Beth's key to her study. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. His name is Dr. Doug Wallace. He's the world expert in mitochondrial biology. He is the doctor that found out that all mitochondrial DNA is inherited on the mother's side. He's also done all the key work from heretofore on it. Here's how mitochondria fundamentally work. When they oscillate, the inner mitochondrial membrane oscillates at 100 hertz. That means you're the ultimate fat burner. So when Rob Wolf or Jimmy Moore or whoever your expert of the day is tells you that fuels determine if you're a fat burner, the answer is no. Doug Wallace has the data and the proof. Pull up one of his YouTube videos and listen to it. He will tell you when that membrane is vibrating at 100 hertz, the crystal lines up perfectly, the respiratory proteins are in supreme position, located hexagonally around a lipid drop, and you burn fat. And when you burn fat, you make heat. And why is infrared heat? Why is this red that I'm wearing something I want y'all to get? Because guess what's special about water? Every single person in this room knows this, but they haven't made the connection. Mitochondria sits around a sea of water. Let me ask you a question. What happens to water when you freeze it? Anybody? Right. Everybody's put like a can of beer in there and expander, right? You know what that means? What's the flip side? When you heat water, it shrinks. People don't think about that part, but guess what? It does. And there's this layer around mitochondria called the aminos. You know why it's there? Because when you shrink water and you release IR light, guess what it does? It shrinks the respiratory proteins. They come closer together. So everybody in this room, okay, every single person in this room, between 35 and 60 angstroms is the difference between respiratory protein 1 and 5, okay? When you get any disease, your respiratory proteins do this. They get bigger. Who proved that? Doug Wallace. What's the name, the medical name for that problem? It's called percent heteroplasmy, okay? So every increase in your respiratory proteins by 1 angstrom reduces the quantum tunneling of electrons from food by a factor of 10. So is it the food that's more important or the distance between the respiratory proteins? What else did Doug Wallace find? This one I think you'll find really interesting. I think Beth will really like it. In medicine, we all know that patients who get fat tend to get type 2 diabetes, then they go on and develop cancers, and if they happen to live long enough because the oncologist is doing his job, then they get neurodegeneration. Wallace found that obesity, heart disease, all the way up to neurodegeneration, you know what the difference is? No genomic changes. Let me say it again, folks. Not one genomic change. But guess what changed? The size and shape of the mitochondria. Guess what he did? He did a really cool study that I bet you none of you know. He took the nucleus out of a cell and left the cytoplasm. He put a brand new mitochondria in it. If the cytoplasm from the sick cell had a brand new mitochondria, guess what kind of daughter cell was made? A sick cell. Hold on, wait a minute. What is medicine saying? Medicine's saying the problem's in the genome. And Doug Wallace just did an experiment that's been reproduced over 1,000 times that probably not one person in this room really knows. And they don't understand the implications. Why? Not even Doug Wallace does, because he doesn't understand what mitochondria fundamentally do. Mitochondria is where the action is. My profession, what my goal is, it's not to piss food gurus off. It's not to piss the paleo guys off. It's not to piss off low carb, high fat, or the Weston A. Price guys. In fact, I'm going to share with you, I think this is where Weston A. Price is really going to like me. You know all these studies that we have of all, metabolic ward studies and this and that? Anybody know where a metabolic ward is? It's in a freaking hospital, under blue light, okay? Anybody, Weston A. Price, former dentist like me, where did he do his studies? Outside in what? Come on, say it, folks. Sunlight. So guess what? Weston A. Price, if he was alive today, I think me and him would be good friends. Because guess what? Y'all are all arguing. See, I'm going to get on your case too. I said it in the back room earlier. I'm going to say it again. A half-truth always leads to a full lie. Why am I a lightning rod in all these communities? Because guess what? For 40 years of my life as a neurosurgeon, I hurt people. And I knew that I hurt them. But I didn't know it until that day at David. And it bothers me. I don't want to see it happen anymore. Did I change the kind of operations I did after that day? I no longer do many of the things that I used to do. I used to make a lot of money doing those things. I don't do it anymore. Why was Beth, what she said today, so powerful to me? The answer's been there. But nobody's connecting the dots. You know why? Because in medical education, it's not that the doctors are bad. Nobody learns quantum physics. I had to go back to Vanderbilt's medical school library and teach it to myself. Okay? But then, color me is shocked that now all these books are coming out and all the stuff that made me sound like I was crazy, maybe crazy works. Maybe you need to consider it. Maybe you need to understand fundamentally how nature works. See, everybody in this room is alive. Everything around us works on a fundamental principle. It's quantum electrodynamic theory. You do not have to know it. When you leave here, I want you to do me one favor. If you think anything I told you today is interesting, go read a little bit more about it, and then I'm going to give you the practical application of quantum electrodynamic theory. I want you to be like the Sphinx. I want you to get up every morning, outside, look at the direction of the sun, anywhere, and I mean as soon as you wake up, first thing, I don't want you having any clothes on, if you can do that, okay? Best is 15 to 30 minutes. Then you eat your breakfast. I don't care, honestly, what you eat. I'd rather you eat a lot of protein and fat because it'll help you reverse and shrink the problem. That's why it's in the protocol. Then I want to make sure that you're as grounded as you can be. So for any of you who want to come and check my shoes, every pair of shoes I have is now custom made because I'm connected when I'm outside completely to the ground. Most of you saw me walking around with no shoes on in the water. Why? What is the effect of grounding? You always hear all these alternative health practitioners talk about how good grounding is. I want you to look up something called the inverse Hall magnetic spin effect. Has anybody ever heard that? Of course not. You know why? Because it's physics. You know, what does that do? What does that process do? It turns a magnetic flux, a source of energy, to a DC electric current. Hey, aren't we back to that DC electric current, the thing that regenerates? You know what else happens in all of you and why I got on the girl in the back of the room earlier and I was with Magda saying, no, blue light is the big one. Why? Blue light not only destroys DHA, you know what else it does? It ruins the melatonin cycle. And do you know what melatonin controls, bro? No, I guarantee you don't. I know the members, my members that are in here do. Melatonin has been shown to control the distance between the respiratory proteins in mitochondria. Okay, still think it's about food, folks? It's about light. It's always been about light, and you have to realize that life fundamentally is photoelectric, okay? Technology in biology should be photonic, not electronic. And that is where our problem is. When Beth put the slide up, which kind of shocked me, and talked about extinction, my members on my site already knew that we're 120 years into the greatest extinction. It started in Chicago when Tesla and Westinghouse electrified the World's Fair. For any of you really are aficionados, go back and look how Tesla died. He died from neurodegeneration. He was crazy as batshit. Why? From touching AC magnetic coils his whole life to prove that Edison was wrong. Turns out, if we're going to use electromagnetism to power our lives, guess what's better? The DC electric current of Edison. That is one of the fundamental changes that have to happen. So what have I done? I showed you earlier in the movie, two people who have fatal diseases. Jeremy's mom was told that he'd be dead at 6 years old. He's 34 years old, and he looks like Adonis. Why am I going to stop at Adonis? Ruben mentioned it earlier. The paleo guys, and if they knew really how much I cared, they'd understand why I'm picking on them. Most of them are all about what they look like on the outside. But this is what they don't understand. Mitochondria also make these things called free radicals. What free radicals are, just so you all know, are chemicals that have unpaired electrons. That means that they have a certain spin. When your body is made up in a triplet state, you are physically as optimal as you're going to be. Can you look like Adonis and be built inside like Swiss cheese? The answer is yes, when you have too much singlet oxygen. When you exercise indoors in a gym around an electric power grid or under blue light, that's precisely what happens. And there's a gentleman who's pretty popular And I'm not going to mention his name. If you want to hear the name later, you come talk to me. He's been in the CrossFit Games, incredible guy. About 3 years ago, he picked up a weight and his thoracic spine fractured. He's now paralyzed. So if you saw this guy, he looked like Jeremy. He looked like David. So the first thing the CrossFit people and the paleo people said, well, he did the lift wrong. He wasn't even lifting that heavy weight. Now I'm going to teach you something about bone. Robert O. Becker, in his book, told us in 1967 that bone was photoelectric. To this day, most orthopedic surgeons and most neurosurgeons don't even know that fact because they wouldn't recommend the things that they recommend. So what does that mean? That means calcium and apatite are a P and N semiconductor. That's right, you heard me say semiconductor, okay? How do semiconductors work differently than regular electricity? When you cool them, the electric current gets stronger. Don't believe me? Take your iPhone, go put it outside right now, leave it on that barbecue pit, and you'll get a temperature warning. Then go put it in the freezer and watch. It works like a charm. Electric current's different. We are built out of semiconductors. Water, when it forms an exclusion zone, is a semiconductor. You are designed to move electrons all over your body. You are designed to be an electromagnetic repository for solar radiation. And that's the reason why when the exclusion zone forms after red light expands it, guess what happens to the exclusion zone? Magda, this one's for you. 270 nanometers is what it refracts at. Magda, what's 270 nanometers? UV. Don't be scared of UV, folks. Now I'm going to teach you something else. I'm not going to take these off. 2009, kept doing my research, and I said, you know, they have a really smart guy in Western A. Price, Chris Masterjohn. He was talking about vitamin A cycles and vitamin D cycles. He's got a lot of things right, but this one he's got really wrong. How does the brain link these two? You know that everything in a cell that's either neuroepithelium or epithelium and brain tissue come from the same tissue. Well, it turns out that vitamin A and vitamin D are the proxy for that issue. Turns out we found out we have an opsin in our eye called neuropsin. It's a UVA receptor. So let me ask you something, Magda. If we have a UVA receptor on the surface of our cornea, how could light from that spectrum be bad? And then let me share with you the key one. The one that really blew everybody's mind was melanopsin. That's the one that works 435 to 465. That's blue light. That's what you guys are making me stand in right now. Okay? I told Dave, next, if I come back, we're putting a hole in the middle so we can have the sun come in. And the reason for that is blue light will raise your glucose and make you insulin resistant even if you're fasting naked outside. It's not conjecture. All the studies have been done. Blue light alone increases your respiratory proteins. What else does it do? Ruins DHA signaling in your eye and your brain. What else? UV light also makes melatonin. Shocker, huh? A night hormone is made by the sun. How does that happen? When do we regenerate? During the day. All biogenic amines, I'll name them for you. Melanin, dopamine, histamine, melatonin, serotonin are all what we call classified medicine as biogenic amines. All biogenic amines are made out of aromatic amino acids. You don't have to know that. Here's what you do have to know. What do all aromatic amino acids absorb? UV light. Still scared? Let me just tell you something. You all came out your mama's vagina with no clothes on. You had no glasses. You didn't have any implanted lenses. You are built with the story of quantum mechanics in you. You have to realize that our cultural and social beliefs have blocked us from this. Ruben alluded to something earlier when he talked about why we make certain decisions. I told one of the ladies in the back room, there's a doctor named Carlos Delgado that did these studies for the US military in the 1960s, and they found out when you block people from what we call the quantum yield of sunlight, You make them obedient idiots. You actually can put ideas in their head on the news at night to get them to do what you want to do. Is this Jack Kruse's opinion? The answer is no. There's something else that happened here in New England that you also may be shocked to hear. It was in January of 1976 on the front page of the Boston Globe. The Russians knew about all this information. This is actually published in Robert O. Becker's book. So when we didn't listen to them about how bad radio frequency and microwaves were, the Russians took one of their microwave detectors and pointed it at our embassy in Moscow for 12 years. We had 3 straight U.S. ambassadors come down with leukemia. Why? When you have radio frequency problems that, like Magda showed, the NTP study that came out 2 weeks ago when I was in London, causes micronuclei. Ask any oncologist, what's the best marker for cancer, any kind of cancer? Micronuclei formation in your blood. Okay? Cancer is an epigenetic disease caused by a broken mammalian battery. Ruben will probably kill me for saying this, but the person that Ruben really loves got cancer really early. When I met him, he told me the story. Then I told him the story of Jeremy and Marie Claude that you saw. I said, they got a genetic disease, and guess what? I'm slowing the process down in them. See, I'm really a metronome. If you want to know the truth, the best clinicians in us figure out how to slow light down in tissues. That's really what I do. And it's all based on physics. The more light you slow down in your tissue media, the more you collect, the more you absorb. Your body has a protein array that uses light to determine how things work in you. In fact, if you look at the visible light spectrum from 260 to 800 nanometers, you break down each frequency, you know, that's like factorial math, like 3 times 2 times 1 equals this. Go all the way through. You'll see that you have an 8 with 21 numbers after it in terms of frequencies. In a cell, there's 100,000 biochemical reactions that happen per cell. Guess what controls that? Quantum entanglement of photons. But what's the key one that you release? IR light. Why am I wearing red? Why do I have red shoes on? Why do I have red glasses back there? Red builds the EZ. That's the first way you begin to shrink your respiratory proteins. UV extends it. Y'all live at the 47th latitude. A little bit more about my story. 3 years ago, I realized that if I was going to keep doing neurosurgery and killing myself to help people like you, that I had to change my life. Because guess what? I started to find in my own biohacks that my heteroplasmy rate was creeping up. And I couldn't do shit about it because you can never get well in the same environment that you got sick in. And if you think eating Western A Price, paleo, or low carb, high fat can fix that, you ain't part of my tribe. Because it's all about mitochondria. That's why Beth and her program knows there's hope. She just didn't know about Doug Wallace. Each one of you, when you leave here, the #1 thing you need to do is learn about Doug. Learn about what he's done, because he's going to win the Nobel Prize in the next 2-3 years. But it's not actionable for anybody who doesn't understand that water shrinks when it's heated. Everybody knows the other way, but they don't understand that. Why does cold work? I told you, it increases electron flow because we're built out of what? Semiconductors. What did I tell you my day job was? A neurosurgeon, right? What do we do when we have traumatic brain injury? Do we cool them? We got a cardiologist in the room. What are they using now? They're cooling people. What adjuvant do we use in neurosurgery and cardiology right now to help a sick heart or brain where mitochondria is based? It's called methylene blue. You know how it works? Same way nicotine does. Shrinks the respiratory proteins. Y'all seeing a trend here yet? Everything is about the size and scale. In my world, we call that the thermodynamic ledge. Okay? I don't think about food the way y'all do. I'm done with that. That was the thing that ruined me, because that's what I fundamentally believe for the first 40 years of my life. I'm going to tell you that we were put on this planet to be able to eat food in our local environment that's quantized by the sun in that local environment. So if you think you can eat a banana in Vermont right now, take me to the banana tree. Guess what? You guys laugh, but I actually mentioned this at PaleoFX 5 years ago and actually had one of the psychiatrists argue with me. And that's part of the reason why the job that I have to do is a tough one. Why? Because my goal when people ask me is to blow medicine up. I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in the food wars. I'm not. What I am interested in is teaching people about how mitochondria really work. And the funny part of the story is, how did me and Ruben come together? Well, I decided to take two of the most famous paleo guys, use their diet under blue light, and worked out in the gym, and I gained 50 pounds. Tell me how, guys. They can't. But they will sell you supplements. They have friends that will sell you supplements. They'll build you a gym and say, come on in. And you'll get a nice physique, don't get me wrong. But are you going to have longevity? I don't think so. And you need to understand that. I always tell my doctor friends who really find my message very counterintuitive, I said, there's this really cool cat named Barzilai up in New York City. He studies super centenarians all over the world. I said, don't you find it kind of interesting that we never see guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger from 1969 that are 120 years old? It's always people that have around 20% body fat. And the ironic part is they all think well. And I always tell them, I said, look, if you want to have a really nice physique at the time you die, you should have been a gorilla. Because guess what? Their mitochondrial density is based in their musculoskeletal system. Where's ours? We're the primate that buried it here and here. What's the number one cause of death as of 2014? That's changing, though. In my opinion, everything's cooked. It's neurodegeneration now. Alzheimer's disease is the number one killer. And guess what? One neuron has 3,600 mitochondria. What else do we know from Doug Wallace? The closer the mitochondria are to the nucleus, the more condensed, the better they function. What do we know when people have neurodegeneration? The further they are away, not so good. What's the key to all mitochondrial biology? What your percent heteroplasmy rate is. So here's where transgenerational epigenetics comes into the picture. If you emerged from the vagina from a mother who worked out in blue light around electromagnetic fields, do you think your percent heteroplasmy is going to be 25, 30%? Or might it be 80%? So when you put that kid in an electromagnetic environment, what happens to his mitochondria? They spread. All of a sudden, autism shows up out of the blue and nobody can figure out why. Well, I got some news for you. Doug Wallace did. And nobody realizes it. And guess what? The talk that you can pull down on YouTube, I told Beth this earlier, you just listen between 50 and 59 of this talk in minutes. And he says it right there. Percent heteroplasmy leads to phenotypic disease presentation with no genomic changes. And I'm telling you, any food guru that can argue with that and the amount of data that he's published over 40 years, you ain't a part of my tribe. That's the key. It's the key to every disease on this planet. So people ask me, some lady came up to me after Ruben talked and wanted to start fighting about the Western A price thing. Here's the key. Make sure you eat food that's designed for your local environment. But I'm going to put a caveat on this. This is where Magda, her data comes in, is what Ruben comes in. It's not just about latitude and altitude. The single most important variable for modern humans is population density. And the reason why is because when you live in a blue-lit microwave world, you have a lot of idiots around you doing things that they don't know they're doing. So their fields are affecting you. So guess what? Living in Vermont, even though it's a low quantum yield environment, is a distinct benefit. It's not a benefit that I can afford because what do I do every day? I go in, if Magda brought her sound noiser into my OR, I think everybody's head would explode because I've already checked it. I can tell you that's the thing that kills me. And I know that I'm on borrowed time because of that. But the problem is I can fix people like no one else can fix them by doing things that seem so counterintuitive, that seem so simple. I mean, let's face it. How hard is it to take your clothes off, look at the sun and ground, and maybe swim in cold water? Tell me. Is that so difficult? Isn't it a little bit more difficult for me to put a craniotomy scar on your head or put a sternotomy on your chest? You know, and I don't want anybody to think, well, I got to eat raw butter, otherwise I'm going to die. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. That's part of the reason why I got to give the paleo guys some credit, because, you know, they've always focused in on, same thing with Western A. Price. You guys know that carbohydrates really aren't bad, but they are bad when you have a low quantum yield. Well, by definition, what Magda, what Ruben, what Beth, and what Jack Kruse are bringing to you right now is you now live in a low quantum yield world everywhere. And the quantum yield in different places are different. For the issues that I mentioned earlier, you go to Europe, they face different diseases. The one that she likes to focus in on is a huge problem in Europe. Why? Because of the resonance of the electric power grid. But what's our problem in the States? Our problem in the States is obesity and neurodegeneration with heart disease. And it's getting worse. And you know what the canary in the coal mine is, wherever Beth is? Myopia. That's what you look at. Because guess what? Your eye clock has to be perfect. And when the size changes and the globe elongates, you get myopia. So if any of you want to look up, what is it called? The abstinence syndrome, or I forget. It's a Japanese syndrome. Celibacy syndrome. There you go. Thank you. You look, Google the celibacy syndrome, you'll find out every kid in Asia doesn't want to have sex anymore. Like if you're a parent over there, you're so happy. But do you know why? Blue light destroys leptin. Leptin is the master controller for the sex steroid hormones. That's the reason it happens. See, I got to get rid of all the bullshit everybody believes because the data is there. The problem is, in my profession, we're not doing a good enough job putting it all together. And the reason why this is going to be hard for most of you to accept, it was the reason why it was very difficult for me to accept. For 40 years, I had ideas put in my head that I believed were correct. And guess what? I erased everything I believed. And I started over. And I started over with a guy named Einstein. I looked at one equation, E equals mc squared. And I was like, well, I know that a dead body has no energy. And E equals mc squared, when we look at it, energy is going this way. It's a nuclear bomb. I think all of us can figure out there's no nuclear bombs going off in us. But here's the interesting thing about E equals mc squared. You know that physics likes math, right? Well, it's a simple mathematics equation. 2 times 3 is how much? What's 3 times 2? 6. It's the same. Communicative property of math. You know what that means? That C squared can be turned into energy. And that is what happens in a mitochondria. You use light energy to make matter. And you know what physics says? Most of you in the room don't know this. When you slow light down, you change matter fundamentally. And if you don't think I'm right, didn't Ruben just show you that Pollack found that water becomes exclusion zone water when light hits it and it becomes a battery? It's different. Tap water is different. I got on Trey earlier about the water. I wouldn't drink the water out of the thing because if it's got fluoride in it, I don't do it. Why? Why is fluoride a problem? Not for all the reasons you believe. Anybody know what a dielectric blocker is? Didn't think so. It's a physics term. Basically, it means it doesn't allow water or a material to absorb as much electromagnetic radiation as possible. So the normal dielectric constant for water that I drink is 80. When you have DHA in your cell membranes that you don't want to eat and you work at night, it goes down to like 20. But when you do the right things, it can go to 160. When your dielectric constant is that high, you know what you make? You make a shit ton of DC electric current. You know what else happens? You make a shit ton of melatonin. You know what else happens? You make a shit ton of dopamine. You know what that means? You follow trends better, people like you better, you get smarter, you become introspective. You actually begin to pay attention to your instinct and not your stupid sister-in-law. Things that used to bother you no longer bother you. For example, I don't spend my time with the food gurus anymore. Why? That's not where the prize is. That's why I was shocked they asked me to come and talk to y'all. But guess what? Do I think it's important? Do I think I have something to add to the game? Can I point you now to books? Can I point you to researchers? Can I show you maybe you should give crazy a chance? Because guess what? All of us are in this together. And we all have to realize that we have created this world together. Every time you go and do something, realize that every person in this room owns 7 to 8 bidirectional microwave RF devices. Somebody asked me to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it now because it came up in London. PEMF devices, never will I use them. And the reason why, Magda put on the slide, the NTP study, anybody who pushes PMF devices should be scared shitless of that study because it showed at extreme low rates. I'm talking about rates like you would get from a clock, from an MRI machine, from any kind of device that uses radio frequency. Your chance of getting cancer is through the roof. Now, granted, it was done in rats, but remember, rats and mice are eutherian mammals. So the same programs work in them. The only difference is they're nocturnal. So I don't think it's a one-to-one correlation, but you need to understand it. The key is it destroys melatonin cycles. Anything that destroys that destroys your respiratory protein shape, and it spreads out. Anything that spreads out in life loses energy. Don't believe me? Think about a star. What happens when a star loses its energy? Stops burning hydrogen, goes to helium, all the way up to iron. When it gets to iron, what happens? It explodes. It's called a supernova. But what else happens? The yellow star became a red giant. It gets bigger. So what does everybody in this room believe about obesity that I no longer believe? That every fat ass that ever came into your life is fat because they eat too much. Turns out they're losing too much light. How do you like that? And guess who showed that to me? Reversing Einstein's E equals MC squared. That is what's built into the leptin prescription. That is what's built into CT protocol. That is what's built into the Quantlet. Okay? The Quantlet basically gives you a third eye that's fully protected, that delivers the right frequencies while cooling. Why is cooling so big? When you cool a surface, you assimilate more UV light. So think about when you cry. When you cry, what's the act of crying? Your cells are stressed. All stressed cells, as Ruben showed you, release extreme low frequency UV light. So that means you have to replace it. So why do the tears come out? Because they cool your cornea where neuropsin is, so you can absorb more UV light, so you can fix your frontal lobe that you just cried about. That's how it works. You want to talk about malaria? You're going to like this one. I use this in London. One of Jeremy's best friends is making a movie. He's made a movie with Jeremy, which he did this for me. He's making one with Ruben. So he's Jeremy's best friend. Mindful, Jeremy's dying. He's got CF. Ben knows everything about this guy. So Ben gets a gig to go to Uganda to film a film about, kids in an orphanage and da-da-da-da. So Ben gets there, and he's filming for 6 days, and he sees this little black kid running around with skivvies, no clothes on, and the lady taking care of him. The last day they're filming, he finds out the kid has malaria and typhoid. And he's like, Jack. He literally gets off the plane, comes to see me, he goes, how is this possible? I said, dude, it's obvious. I said, where were you? You were in Uganda. I said, did you look at the latitude? He goes, no. I said, what's special about equatorial Africans? They live in the strongest UV light 12 hours a day. They don't really have circadian biology. You want to know why their skin is black? Because black skin protects them from too much UV light. What else does? You want to know why the Maasai really drink the blood of cows? Carotenoids are natural protectors for UV light. That's why they do it. So why is Ben interested? He said, how can you have malaria and run around like Michael Jordan, not look like you have any problems at all? He said, what would happen if my kid got it? I said, dude, if your kid got it, he'd be freaking in the ICU for 3 weeks. He'd be dead. He goes, I don't understand this. I said, dude, malaria is actually a help to equatorial humans. He said, what do you mean? I said, what's in a red blood cell? Porphyrins and hemoglobin. What do porphyrins do? Anybody? Absorbs UV light. Do you know that a porphyrin chemical is exactly the same as what's in the tree right outside? You know what the only difference is? Magnesium's in the middle, iron's in the middle for us. They're green, we're red. You know what the difference is? Electrons. So why did the mosquito carrying the malaria know to bite the black kid? Because he got too much UV light. You want to know something that's special about insects? They can see UV light. So they know who to bite. So guess what? It's an epigenetic adaptation for their local environment that's tied to the quantum yield of their environment. So if a kid from Mississippi, 29th latitude, went and got bit, how would they get bit? Because that is a stress response because they're in an environment that their mitochondria aren't optimized to via the quantum yield that shrinks their respiratory proteins. The bug doesn't know the difference, and he bites you. And everybody in this room thinks malaria is bad. And it's not. It actually helps equatorial Africans survive in an equatorial environment that's inhospitable for humans. That is quantum mechanics 101. What's special about Jeremy? Anybody who picks up my book and reads it, you're going to see the blanket answer is paleo ketogenic diet is optimized for a blue lit microwave world. You now have a clue why. Why isn't it good for Jeremy? Jeremy has cystic fibrosis, okay? Jeremy lives a hypoxic life. He has half a lung. You know what that means? That there's not a lot of oxygen left at the end. So he doesn't have a lot of terminal electrons that he can accept. So if he eats a ketogenic diet, he's going to fall apart. Why? Too much flow, not enough oxygen. What does that do? It creates free radicals. That destroys him. So what does he have to eat to keep the physique and the body that he does? He has to eat a shit ton of carbohydrates. But guess what else he has to do? He has to be in strong sun. Jeremy lives on a Christmas tree farm in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, never has clothes on, and CTs every day. His FEV1 went from 46 to 71. Here's my message. Was it really about food, or was it about the light environment? And with that, I'll answer any questions. Totally alike disease. I mean, if you look, I wish some of my members from Norway were here. Seasonal affective disorder. It's a disease of light. It's usually caused by altered circadian cycles of serotonin, melatonin, and low DHA. So the key thing is, with those people, if you're going to add the light back, it's only going to be a short-term effect for what Ruben said. You have to have the DHA and water in the system. Just so you guys know, when you live in a microwave world, make a real-world example. You have a piece of steak, you put it in the microwave, heat it up, you don't put a paper towel around it. What does it taste like? Shoe leather. Why? Because it's dehydrated. What did I just tell you? So when you have SAD, you got to add seafood, you got to add the water back, and then you have to take them out of the environment they got sick in. If you do not change the environment you get sick in, you will not get better. That's why cancer recurs, okay? Don't forget it. In the back. Yeah, that's called the modern world, my friend. That's not how they were. I mean, if you go back 150 years, that's not how they were. Hawaiians the same way. I mean, just go back and read the books on King Kamehameha, 7 foot tall, 350 pounds of solid muscle. The stories from Albert Schweitzer that even predate Weston A. Price, where he found American Indians that could run faster than wild animals. And today, people think that's a parable. It's not. That's really what we're designed to do. The problem is that people don't realize we started changing our environment, if you want to take it all the way back, 170,000 years ago. You know what the first circadian mismatch was for humans? Clothes. What was the second one? Fire. Are you designed to get IR light at all hours of the night? Ruben didn't tell you this, but I will. I'm a fan of fires, but I will tell you, too much red light at night, Ruben, doesn't it destroy melatonin? So if you get in that infrared sauna and go hog wild crazy, you can screw yourself up. What's the other problem? if you use infrared too much on your body to try to shrink things down, you can actually get fibrosis in your muscles. And anybody who's a wound care doc or a neurosurgeon like me will tell you, you have to be very careful because you have to understand what your patient's heteroplasmy rate is, okay? The problem is we don't know what those people in modern world are going to respond like. The belief is because they have carbohydrates going all the time, they're going to eat them, but the non-native EMF around them, the blue light around them is what destroys them. And what I'm trying to explain to you is insulin resistance, sans food, can be done by both non-native EMF and blue light. And everybody wants to, Magda was really, really politically correct when she said, well, it's part of the story. I'm not going to be politically correct. It is the freaking story. And you know why it's not the story? Because food gurus, because they have something to sell you. Let me ask you a question. How expensive is it to maybe change your morning routine and live like the Sphinx? How much money do I make from you for doing that? You understand why my message is a little bit inconvenient for those who sell supplements, pills, and solutions? It ain't that hard, people. It really isn't. The problem is you think you have to work in the environment that you're in. Most of us do. I'll be the first one to tell you that what I'm doing, the difference between me and all y'all, I know what I'm doing. You don't. Now you do. That's the reason why I had the glasses on. That's why Dave went out. I mean, I can't say enough about Dave. I had no idea he was going to do that. And to be honest with you, I was looking forward to talking to him tonight because I really wanted to know why he did invite us. I couldn't figure it out, but I told him, I said, if I come, Ruben's got to come. Why? Because you both need to know, the way Ruben and I got entangled is our job is to save our species who's headed to an extinction, and they don't know it. Let me just tell you something. Everybody in this room right now is exactly like a T-Rex. The only difference is they saw the asteroid coming, you don't. And let me explain something else to you. Because this story, if any of you haven't read my book, the last chapter of my book, I want to teach you a little bit about evolutionary biology. 65 million years ago, the age of mammals began. But here's the key. An asteroid 6 miles wide hit the planet in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's called the Chicxulub crater. Does anybody know the two animals that made it through that extinction event? Theropod dinosaurs and eutherian mammals. Okay, what are theropod dinosaurs today? Birds. Why did birds make it through? Because they disconnect from the earth and fly long distances. What does that mean? They have mitochondrial capacity. Who do you come from? Eutherian mammals. Why did eutherian mammals have mitochondrial capacity in the beginning before anything happened? Because they slept for 6 months under the ground outside of the sun. So you know what that means? Birds and eutherian mammals are designed to live in a low quantum yield world. Guess what, folks? You're pushing the freaking limits. Because when that asteroid hit in the Yucatan Peninsula, we created a huge cloud that blocked photosynthesis for anywhere between 100 and 1,000 years. Realize that the story that I just told you about mitochondria happened 65 million years ago. Why do I have the hope that Beth has? Because I know we can fix it. Do I know that we can mitigate it? Here's the key. If you know that you're one of those people, that your heteroplasmy rate is 80, 90%, you better get your ass in the cold water because that's the best Faraday cage on the planet and it ain't expensive. In fact, me and Devin were in the lake this morning. I'll tell you, it's 55 degrees. It's awesome. We got up this morning. We were out Sphinx-like with no shoes and everybody looking at us. Do I care what you think about me? No. Why? Because who are you good for if you're not good enough for yourself? I didn't try to change my wife, my family, my kids until I got me right. Then they changed. That's how I met half the people who are members in my room. They understood what I was saying was very counterintuitive and very unusual. And I will argue with any food guru in the world because the bottom line is each one of you saw the way that movie started. A tree is the basis of photosynthesis. Everything, every food web on this planet goes back to that. And you can't forget that. You need to understand a whole lot more about light and electrons before you can call yourself a food guru. And if you can't, then what you believe is a half-truth. Guess what you have? What's the name of the state? Granite State, right? Was that New Hampshire? All right. Close enough. It's still the same. It's still the same rocks. Do you know what's special about the granite and the basalt here? It's not a geopathic stress zone. What did I tell you you are? You're a eutherian mammal. You're designed to be connected to the earth for 6 months with no sunlight, aren't you? You have that program built in you and you don't know about it. But guess what? That's what's in the leptin prescription and cold thermogenesis. So if I could get you connected with all fours, you saw Jeremy climbing on that rock there? Jeremy is the most connected mammal you're ever going to meet. He's an expert rock climber with no lungs. You know why he can breathe through his skin? Magda, pay attention. This is good. Because I found out his answer is that UV light on the skin increases venous O2. Do you know that every disease on this planet is tied to pseudohypoxia and low NADH like Sinclair found? That's how I figured out Jeremy's problem. So guess what? Jeremy can breathe through his lungs. That means you can live in a low quantum environment if you're willing to connect more to the Earth's magnetic flux, because you need to realize the program in you uses the inverse Hall magnetic spin effect. That's what turns magnetic flux into a DC electric current. The DC electric current is directly correlated to your melatonin levels. Your melatonin levels directly correlates to your respiratory proteins. That's all you got to do. I'm be honest with you. I really, truly wish that my wife would have came, because I know most of the ladies in here, and I will tell you, this is a true story. When I relocated, when I realized that I had to go to a higher quantum yield environment for my own family, the only thing me and my wife fight about is light. I mean, to this day, we fight about the light. I told her when I came here, I said, you better get your ass in the backyard at least 5 or 6 hours, because my wife is darker than I am. She's from New Orleans originally, but it's a battle. To try to get a Southern woman to take her clothes off is brutal. I mean, it really is. I think, to be honest with you, I think Vermont's kind of weird. I don't think we're going to have a hard time with it up here. It may be a problem in November, December, January, and February, because, you know, most of you don't know this. I went to dental school up here. I used to be a dentist. I went to UConn, so I used to come up here all the time for the leaves change. And trust me, even back then, this place, even though it's further away, I would tell you, could I do my job in Vermont? The answer is decidedly no. But I don't know what you do, okay? I don't know what your risk is for blue light toxicity. I could teach you so much more about blue light, like the blue light hazard in your eye. You know, you're wearing glasses. That's the first thing that worries me about you. You know, I know that your eye clock isn't working as fast as this one here. Do I need to teach you about general and special relativity? You need this clock to run faster than anything else. So I'm going to tell you the way the photoelectric effect works. If you live here, you need to eat more seafood. If you want to do the paleo way and just eat grass-fed meat, I'll be honest with you, I think when you live in a low quantum yield world that's microwaved, it's not enough. That's my big beef with the paleo community. It's not that I think the guys are wrong. I actually like all of them. I just don't want them selling people a half-truth. And the reason why is what I told you. I was guilty for the first 40 years of my life. I know what I did was wrong. I know there was no intent, just like I know they have no intent. But I want you all to know that most of the shit you believe, you need to question. I can tell you right now, the things that I do every year, I do this every December 31st, the things that I hold most fundamental to me, I write them down on a piece of paper and I challenge them. I look in the literature to find things that disprove it. I've been doing that for 10 years. I don't even believe what I believe. And let me just tell you something. Do you know how you get that ability? Because it's not a joke. You see, I didn't laugh. When your dopamine level goes really high, you actually begin to think a lot better. And thinking like that, thinking counterintuitively, begins to make sense, because all you have to do is look at the people around you. They're all sick. I mean, you heard Beth say it. You heard Magda say it. Well, if they're all sick, it can't be the genome. It's what electrifies and magnifies the genome is the big deal. And that happens to be light. And that's the message that y'all need to get. So if you do have a disease linked to high heteroplasmy rates, and you learn a little bit about Doug Wallace, my hope for you, if you live in Vermont, because he asked me to say this, I just want you to go to the Yucatan. Come visit me in Playa del Carmen. Come to New Orleans. Just come down there for a week. You want to hear the coolest thing about vitamin D that I recently learned in the last 2 years? Is that within 7 days, you can improve your optical density in your tissues just from getting UV and IR light. But guess what? Where you're sick, where your problem is, that's where it needs to be exposed to the sun. And that's the key. And you have to be hydrated. You can't be dehydrated. So I look at everybody's BUN and creatinine. Say it again? Yeah. So like people that I do necks and I do a lot of backs. I actually tell the ladies, take all your clothes off on the back, and what I want you to do in the morning, stand like this. Then where the afternoon sun is like this. For you guys right now, just so you know, and I'm glad you brought this up, you just reminded me. For those of you who don't know, you have an expert very close to you, and maybe you'll invite him next year, Dr. Mike Holik. He's at Harvard University. He teaches everybody about vitamin D. He doesn't teach what I'm teaching about vitamin D, because vitamin D for me is a proxy for the DC electric current. That's all it is. When your vitamin D level's low, it means that your environment sucks. That's what it means. But there's an app on an iPhone called D-Minder, and you can plug in your latitude and longitude. It will tell you, based on how much skin you have exposed, how much vitamin D you're making per minute, not per day, per minute. So when the idiot doctor tells you, oh, well, the Institutes of Medicine say you should only take 2,000 IU per day, you can laugh at them because you can say, look, I came out of my mother's vagina and I can make 450 IUs in a minute. And then you begin to realize that the story you've been sold is complete, utter bullshit. When the primary care doctor says, Dr. Kruse put you on 50,000 IU a day, you're going to be toxic. You're going to die. You know, your eyeballs are going to fall out. Sweetheart, my website will split your head wide open. and I'm glad you did ask this, and there's a reason I have to say this, because I think newbies, when they come to my way of thinking, can we turn the camera off for a minute? Serious, just turn it off for a minute. There's a reason we got to do that. How you like that? And do I have a blog on that for you? It's called Hashimoto's Meets Melasma, Gateway Disease. When you read it, you'll shit the bed. It's all quantum mechanics. You'll sit there and go, well, I definitely didn't hear this from a dermatologist. Great question. I'm glad you asked it. She said she wants to know why the South is the stroke belt and everything else. Who lives in the South? Lots of black folks, huh? What did I just tell you about the mosquitoes? No, it's huge. Mississippi, the state that I'm in, let me tell you, it's probably 40%. Mississippi, I guess I can share this. Everybody, when they heard I was moving to Mississippi, they were like, dude, it's 50th and 50th and everything. So why did I do it? Willie Sutton, you know the story? They asked him, why did he rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. Well, guess what? If I can use these principles on the sickest people in the United States and they get better, maybe crazy ain't so crazy. Pretty crafty, huh? Guess what? That's the problem. The problem is Southern culture does certain things. Like if you came down to New Orleans right now, I'm not kidding, you would see women covered, and let me tell you something, Southern belles, they wear more makeup than freaking Maybelline. Umbrellas, it's just a totally different world. And like New Orleans, where I have another house, people do things at night. Like they don't have these. You guys now have the benefit of having these all the time. If any of you had been up last night when Devin and I got in around 10 o'clock, you would have seen that we actually got into a fight with the innkeeper to turn the 2 lights off out on the south porch so we could drink wine. And yes, we did break rules by drinking wine last night. So just so any of you know, why is resveratrol good? Not for what the cardiologist is going to tell you. I'm going to tell you why. It is the best fermented probiotic known to man. Do you know why? Resveratrol absorbs 312 nanometer light. Ruben, you need to tell everybody the story about the GDV camera. He actually went and had his body checked, and the guy checked all his energy stuff and this and that. And the first thing he said to me, he goes, there's only one thing you have a problem with. You don't drink enough red wine. True? And guess what? Who's been telling him that? It's not related to the sun. Yeah. No, what it's designed, just so you know, there's a book for you, and I'm glad you brought this up. This is a book that you can read in a weekend. It's written by a guy named John Ott, O-T-T. It's called Health and Light. John Ott became famous because Walt Disney hired him to do time-lapse photography. He showed that when you have an altered solar spectrum, both in plants and animals, you develop problems in neuroepithelium. Well, guess what? This is the medical term that I would use is your skin surface has a higher ubiquination rate. Magda called it some kind of speed-up aging disease. The technical name is ubiquination. Ubiquination is protein turnover. The single most expensive thing for a cell is protein turnover. Guess what turns off protein turnover? Solar light. So what I would tell you is you have an altered solar spectrum on the surface of your skin. The real predictor there is that means anything tied to skin also is a problem with you. So I'm going to tell you up here I'd be worried. I'd be worried about, you know, not only just neurodegeneration, but a lot of different diseases that are associated with it. For example, if you were really cool, or if you ever join my site and you have an MRI of your brain, I have a blog, How to Read Your Own MRI. Biohack your own MRI, because what is an MRI? It's a proton shadow cast. So the way I read MRIs is not the way you do. And guess what? Am I teaching regular Joes like you to read an MRI better than a radiologist can? The answer is yes. Now, if any of the doctors read that blog, they'll be like, I never heard this in medical school. That's the point. If I can teach you, see, this is the way I look at it. I didn't know any of this stuff 10 years ago. So if I didn't know it, why can't you know it? Am I any better than you? No, I just did really good in medical school at the top of my class, but I just got finished telling you that everything I learned there was freaking wrong. So what good is it? Think about it. You know, and I know when you guys laugh, you think, how can a neurosurgeon actually say that? That's really, I know that's true. And the thing is, we never improve by being drunk on our success. We improve by our failures. And that failure, that tear in my knee, was the best freaking thing that ever happened to me in my life. I'm not kidding you. It's completely changed the person that I am. And when you marry that change with a guy from New York that likes to curse a lot, it's a lightning rod for controversy. And see, that's why I like controversy. Okay? I'm just like Trump, except a different kind of version. It's true. Hey, it's working for him, so don't laugh. In the back. Stand up. And you're a big dude. Come on, speak it out. Whew. Yeah, I'll start with the second one first because that's a great question. We don't have a great test, okay, to measure heteroplasmy. But I will tell you, and I've not told anybody this, including Ruben, there is an indirect measure. I have a good friend who's also a friend of Ruben's. His name is Dr. Ted Achozo. If you go on my Dr. Jack Kruse Facebook page, it's probably 4 posts before, there's a YouTube video of him giving a talk about mitochondria. It's an hour and 14 minutes long. There is a test done by SpectraCell that measures ROS. Then there's another test that measures all the TCA metabolites. Now, this is an indirect measure. What did I tell you before when Magda was talking, what I said? That when the mitochondria oscillate at 100 hertz, you're the perfect fat burner. That's ideal for all eutherian mammals, okay? When you can't do that, what's the Warburg effect fundamentally? When you can't fat burn, you have to use what? Glycolysis in the cytoplasm. What happens then? When you use too much of that, 2 things you're going to see spike. You're going to see ROS spike, and you're going to see all the different steps of the Krebs cycle go through the roof. So the smart clinician, which Ted happens to be, I mean, he's a nutritional mitochondriac. That's what I call myself. I'm a mitochondriac. I am addicted to mitochondria now. But Ted has taught me that I can use this as an indirect measure. And I'm going to be very honest with you. You got to remember, I'm a neurosurgeon. So the times people come to me especially for some of the cases I do, it's pretty late in the game. Like if you got a GBM or you got a metastatic disease in your brain, which is what I took care of right before I came here, that's a problem. But if you got degenerative disc disease, you got a disc herniation, you got too much fat replacement in your muscles and too much fat in your bone because you have a low quantum yield, I can fix that using those things. The problem really becomes is medical insurance doesn't pay for it. Most of the people that I see, here's the downside of where I moved to, they're broke. Y'all are considered rich compared to them. They can't afford those tests, and medical companies don't pay for it. So biohackers do. Guys like me and Ruben usually talk to, they order every freaking test under me. I mean, Ruben was spending $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month. I can tell you in my whole biohacking career, I have probably spent $250,000 doing tests on me. And I mean, when I want to know, I want to know. I don't have to do as much anymore because I think I got it down. Now I know what my real problem is. It's my job. That's why my wife wants me to quit. Why am I? I'm Irish, Northern European. I have freckles. You know anything about melanin? Melanin actually absorbs and releases UV light. So I have more freckles in lots more places. But here's the crazy thing that you'd be interested in, and I'll invite you to do this with me. You fly down to New Orleans. I'll put your ass and my ass outside, and we'll see who can last the longest. Because guess what? My solar callus now, in 29th-degree latitude this time of the year, 5 hours. And guess what happens? This is why I wish my wife was here. I get pink the next morning I wake up. Why? Because I assimilate it. There's the difference. And guess what? Do I do extraordinary things the days that I operate versus the days I don't? Because remember I told you, I know that I'm killing myself. I'm like the lady putting the laptop on here, speeding up the circadian clock in her uterus, throwing off ovulation. Like Magda put the Johnson, you need to use the IUD story. Because guess what? Infertility in women is ridiculous. Let me just tell you something. If there was an OBGYN in the room, if you want to become the richest doctor fastest, be a fertility doctor. I'm not kidding you. And the prices they charge, I'm like, if I was in their shoes, I would just go to Guatemala or Uganda and adopt a kid. There's no way I'm going to spend $200,000. And the crazy thing is, I hope you like that Jerry Springer show because that's what caused it. At 10 o'clock at night. And sunscreen, dude, do you even have to ask? I mean, that's like, there may be another time if I come back and give a story. I need to teach you guys about fundamentally how the skin really works. Do you know what the best sunblock is? I already told you the food trick. Beth brought this up. You know why autistic kids and the paleo guys think that nightshades are bad? All nightshades have carotenoids. What did I tell you carotenoids do? They block UV light. So these are the people that need UV light, and you're eating something that blocks it. Are nightshades bad? I eat them all the time. Where do I live? New Orleans. I'm always naked. There's a reason for that. It's the same story with the malaria and the black kids. Realize it has nothing to do with the food. It has to do with the pigment, the photopigment. Where is carotenoids based? In the surface epithelium that blocks the quantum yield. What's the law that determines it? Snell's law or Fermat's principle? Can you ask a simple question? Yeah, here's the key with light. Everybody in the room knows that the eye is a camera, okay? So that means for vision, the frequencies that we use in vision, you know that there's 7 parts of the solar spectrum. The middle parts are the parts that we use for the camera. So purple and red, which is why you'll always see me wearing purple and red, are the ones that we use to signal the clock mechanism. Blue light at night destroys melanopsin. Melanopsin is what regenerates the central retinal pathways. Those central retinal pathways are what, in the morning when you go out and do the Sphinx, blue light from the sun is designed to go into your pituitary gland and turn the compound pharmacy on. Okay? Do you know why the blue light in the sun's not bad, Magda? Sunlight has equal parts of red and blue. So the antidote is in AM sunlight for blue light. This light has 4 times the color temperature, blue, no red, no UV. Ruben showed you the spectroscope. That's the real problem. So you have to realize to optimize your eye clock, you must get AM sunlight. And I will tell you, if you're a shift worker, my advice, term insurance, make me the beneficiary. It's KRUSE, okay? And it's the truth. You need to protect. Blue light is the single biggest thing that's destroying us. And here's the irony, and I don't know if Beth's still here. It's the single biggest thing that's destroying our species. Yeah, no, blue light. Artificial light is destroying us, okay? Here's the irony if Beth's still in the room. What is Autism Speaks color? Exactly. When you read John Ott's book, what's the number one color of light that causes cancer in epithelial tissues? Pink. Think about breast cancer. Now stop for a minute. WHO 2009, what's the number one risk factor for breast cancer in women? Low vitamin D level. How do you make vitamin D? UVB. Got it? Still think the sun's bad. Over here. Vitiligo is an autoimmune condition, and I'm going to tell you, that's complicated. I don't know if I have a blog on that, but I can tell you this. Everybody, and I'm telling you this specifically, I actually do have one. It's Why the King of Pop Died, Michael Jackson. I wrote it like 4 or 5 years ago, so you can look that one up. Most people will blame the gut. I didn't talk very much about the gut, and the reason why, it's also probably the number one thing that people in the alternative world and in my world are brutalizing. They have everything wrong. And I'm going to explain to you quickly why, because it ties to this. In your gut, what the microbiome is designed to do, it's made up of a bunch of bacteria. What you guys don't know about bacteria is a guy named Fritz Popp, who was a biophysicist, he's now dead. He found, utilizing photomultipliers, that bacteria release 5,000 times more light than eukaryotes, okay? The process, the way the microbiome works in humans, is it's designed to have a light show. That's the reason why the internal part of the gut has vitamin D receptors. You know that you don't get any UV light because I told you it bounces off on the surface. But the bacteria inside you do. What is the lining of the gut made out of? Enterocytes. What are they loaded with? DHA. What did I tell you about light before? Light turns the DHA turns the light into a DC electric current. So someone has vitiligo, has a simplified gut flora because you have to have a quantized match here, here, and here. So the mismatch is your surfaces. So one of the things I teach my members is that one of the predictions that I made in a recent webinar is that, in my opinion, within 50 years, biochemistry will be shown to be a joke, that the single most important thing that's going to be important is what happens at the surface. Because what happens at the surface determines what biochemistry happens before. So what does that mean? Biochemical pathways, the lever that controls them is the light frequencies that get to them. And I tried to explain to you a little bit in this talk how red light has that ability to the ATPase. But what does the ATPase do? In medicine, we believe it's the high energy phosphate bond. No, Gilbert Ling told us. It unfolds proteins. When you unfold proteins, you open up more binding sites for water to bind to. You have more water. What happens when light hits it? Bigger battery. So what I would tell you, fundamentally, you are a Ferrari, okay, that has a really bad electrical system, and you can't turn on the T regulator cells in your gut. And those T regulator cells in your gut are causing a circadian mismatch with the melanocytes on your skin. And what I'm telling you is the heteroplasmy rates on your skin and in your enterocytes are the problem. So what do you need to do? You're the kind of person that I would take home with me, put you in the Yucatan for about 18 months, eating a high seafood diet, connected to the ground, going in the water all the time. And I would use something on you called the Fournier effect. The Fournier effect is an effect where we make you cold, bring you out in the sun. It's kind of like what Ruben had talked to the lady over here about cold and hot showers. What it does, anytime you have a temperature change, it increases the electron flow without you having to eat any more. And what I'd also have you do, you'd wind up doing shit tons of intermittent fasting. And the reason for that is intermittent fasting is one of the key ways for people who are food gurus to actually learn a little bit about mitochondria, because that's fundamentally how it works. And what you're going to find out when you start to live my world is the more you're connected to the Earth's magnetic field and the more you're connected to the canopy, the less food you have to eat. But the food that you must eat in your condition is DHA. Why? Because you have a broken film. And when I say film, I mean like a screen. You can't tell the light show that's going on. You can easily build the microbiome back up very quickly by changing some of the foods you eat, but you also have to remember that if you don't change the signal through your eye and on your skin, you lost. And I told you, if you live here in Vermont, you need to change the environment that you got sick in. And you need to understand where your disease manifests not only in the gut surface, but also on the skin. So you have two of the four. The four key surfaces that I teach people about are eye is by far the number one. Skin is number two most important. Gut is number three. And then the lung surface is number four. And those are the four quantum surfaces that control pretty much all the biochemistry in your body. And I would tell you to learn a little bit about Fritz Popp, the book that I mentioned. It's Roland Van Wyck, R-O-E-L-A-N-D, Van, V-A-N, last name W-I-J-K. The name of the book is Light Sculpting Life. And he basically took all the data that probably cost me 10 grand to photocopy, and I swear to God, when you read this book, you're going to sit back and go, how is no one talking about this? I mean, it's unbelievable what's published. It truly is. And see, that's the problem. The thing is, just because something's published doesn't mean everybody knows it. And that's really what Beth's problem is. Beth's want to make an apps and this and that. I'm like, stop. Just read Doug Wallace's work. Wallace and Pollock for autism is a home run. Done?